Hey, what's up guys? I gotta be kind of quiet because it's really late. It's actually almost 12:30. But I got a great YouTube message and it prompted me to want to do this video. And I want to talk about how to get the most tonally out of your electric guitar. What I mean by that is not, what kind of woods you're using or what kind of tuners or anything. I mean, all this stuff contributes, but what I want to talk about is your pickups and your knobs. There's nothing super fancy about the guitar. It has two humbuckers, 2 volume, 2 tone, and the tones have coil taps, or splits, they're coil splits, on them so that you can get these inside 2 pickups. Basically what I want to talk about is how you can get a lot of different sounds and tones from just the guitar and the knobs without really changing anything on your amp or your pedals or any of that stuff. Now all that stuff's great, but if you get the most you can get out of it before you do that, then you're really going to be able to maximize how many different sounds and feels, tones you can get out of the amp. So what I've got here is a pretty decent gain setting. This is kind of like my main rhythm tone that I would use live. So it's it's got a pretty decent amount of gain. It's so I mean it's got enough gain and bottom that I could do sort of metal riff. Let's start with your volume knob. So your volume knob is sort of deceptive in its name. When you're playing on a clean channel, your volume knob really acts as a volume knob. But if you're playing in a distorted amp, actually what your volume knob is doing is acting as a gain knob up until a certain point, and then it will start to cut the volume. Because your preamp is clipping, so what you're doing is you have this natural compression and it keeps your guitar volume kind of at the same level, and it just makes the sound cleaner and more clear, less distorted. It's sort of the same way the gain knob on the amp would work, but with a little bit different feel. So what you can do is work that by itself just to get different tones. So here's the guitar full up, and right now I've got the tones on 10, so this is all just the volume knob. There's the guitar all the way up. And that sounds great. So if I wanted something maybe just a little bit less than that, I might turn the volume knob down to like 8. So if we do that, we get something like this. It's just a little tiny bit less gainy, and it could maybe serve for certain chords that wouldn't ring out quite as nice. Maybe like a major 7 or something. So if you're playing some sort of more laid-back bluesy stuff, but you still want a little bit of crunch, that's a good way to do it. Just roll your volume back just ever so slightly. And then let's go even further. If we go back to, say, about 5, it's noticeably cleaner. And the louder your amp is, the bigger difference this will make. Now my amp is not very loud, so I'll turn the microphone off just for this, and you can hear this is how loud my amp actually is. So it's really quiet. But if you have it up really loud, then this makes even more difference because your tubes are working. So anyway, so down like this, depending on how hard I hit the guitar with my pick, or my fingers, however I want to do it, can really make a difference. So if I hit the strings hard, it still crunches a little bit, but I could sort of clean it up. And get sort of a lo-fi clean sound, which has its own purposes too, especially live when you want to get sort of a low moment. So let's go down even further. It's about 2.5. Now on my guitar with these knobs, if you go really much lower than this, then it kind of starts to lose volume and it's not really as useful. You hear this is, this is full humbucking. This is a pretty hot humbucker. It's a crunch lab. And I just have the volume rolled down on this amp. Cleans up really nice. But then again, if you dig in, it gets a bit more, gainy. Kind of like, something you might hear Pete Townsend do. Lots of clarity in the open strings. So that's the volume knob and the bridge pickup. Now, like I should mention that every pickup is different and every knob is different. It reacts differently, so you have to learn your guitars and you have to get the feel for your guitars. But we'll switch over to the neck, still in humbucking mode. here's the volume all the way up. And that's a good sort of full sound. It has lots of mids and lots of sort of presence too. I mean, it's a big sound. But again, maybe say I don't want quite that much. I can roll the volume down a little bit. And doing something as simple as taking my palm and sort of palming the pick. Then I can use my thumb and get sort of a pseudo jazz thing. So we'll roll the volume down even more. This is to the about 2.5 mark. So it's much cleaner, but it's still very warm and full. So if you wanted to play something clean, but you didn't want that really stringy single coil type sound, this is a great way to do it. Okay, so now let's talk about the coil taps, or splits. I'm sorry, they're splits. Coil taps are actually, that's kind of a misnomer. Coil tap would mean that you have one of those coils that has a ground somewhere in the middle of the turns, and when you tap it, you lower the output of the single coil pickup. It doesn't actually work that way in humbuckers. These are actually coil splits, but it gets called both things. So this is usually what people mean. All right, so now we're going to single coil mode. So this is guitar and hum. And here, same pickup in single coil mode. Okay, so not only did it thin the sound out, it also turned the gain back a little bit, and it give you a lot more clarity, especially in the high register. You hear those high strings ring out. Okay, so now this is another thing. The tone knob on your single coil is going to be very responsive, and we'll get to that in a second. But here's the single coil by itself, so that's a good sound. So maybe if I go down halfway here, really stringy, and then down to about 2.5. That's a passable clean sound. So we'll do the same thing on the neck pickup, put it in single coil mode. So okay, so now roll the volume back a little bit. So again, you have a much cleaner sound, it's more crisp on the top strings, and it's very dynamically responsive. So if I pick hard, or if I pick softly, it's a very different sound. Okay, so now let's put it back in humbucking and let's talk about the tone controls. This is one of those things that fascinates me because a lot of modern guitar players in particular don't want a tone knob on their guitar, sometimes not a volume knob either. But they'll have one pickup or two pickups and a volume knob. And I like the simplicity sake of that. I see that when you're running across stage and you're doing your rock and roll moments or whatever, you just have the one volume knob and you want to cut it off. But you lose a lot of different tonality with the tone knob if you lose it. The tone knob all the way up on my bridge humbucker sounds like this. It's good and fat. It's got lots of mids and it's really tight and punchy. Anyway, this is like my favorite bridge pickup ever. Okay, so now the tone knob here, if I roll that back a little bit, let's say to maybe 7. Now you notice it's gotten a little darker and the mid-range has become a bit more prominent, and also it's just slightly tapered the gain off because you're losing some of the frequency, so it's just a tiny bit less gain. And this is really good if you want to get sort of older style rock sounds like classic rock. A lot of those guys who were using dark amps and or we're using the tone knob to get a darker sound. And so you can get a sort of like Bad Company kind of crunch thing. Alright, so that's with the tone knob around 7. Now if I was to roll it down a little further, maybe say 3, you're going to notice it get really dark. Almost it starts to get a cocked back wah sound, which I don't like doing that with my wah pedal because it's spring loaded, so if I do that with mine I have to actually just stand on the wah pedal. So it sounds like this. And you might be thinking, well, no, that's really dark and that's kind of covered up. What would I use that for? One of the other things that's great about your tone knob is that not only does it turn your sort of high end down, but it also turns you down in the mix. Without changing your volume on your guitar or anything, just rolling the tone knob back can lower you down in the mix in a rhythm setting. So if you don't want to take up quite so much space, if you want to let a singer take over, or you want to let a guitar player, sort of take the spot, which of course none of us want to do, then you can roll that tone knob back, and so if I play the same riff with here's the tone all the way up. Now if I was to roll that tone back down to about 3 where it was, you're going to notice it's a lot more sort of subtle. So if you have another guitar player and a singer and a drummer and a bassist and everything going on, that really lowers you in the mix and can be great for live situations, and or just when you're recording if you want to get a sort of less present guitar sound. So we'll hop over to the neck pickup, and here's the neck pickup humbucking with the tone all the way up. So really good tone. Again, it's fat and woody. It's got lots of mid-range, and you have those nice sort of chirpy high things on the high strings, which is DiMarzio really did a good job with this pickup. It's not really easy to get neck pickup pinch harmonics on low gain sounds, or lower like this. So so now if I roll the tone back to say maybe 7 or so. This is what I would call sort of like Carlos Santana land. Depending on what you play and how you phrase, you can really get a sweet, woody, mid-range, almost like a saxophone type tone here. And what I really like about that is when you play double stops or chordal sounds with that kind of tone, it really gets kind of snarly and woofy, and it sounds mean, and I like it a lot. So now we'll go all the way down with the tone, and I usually don't go all the way down with the tone on the bridge pickup because I think it just kind of sounds bad, but all the way down on the neck with a good pickup sounds really good, and it sounds like this. You might recognize that tone from something like Eric Clapton would have done with the old Cream thing. I think they would call that the woman tone. And really, it's easy to get. You just, your bass pick up all the way up and you roll the tone all the way off. And then you have that really fat, like Sunshine of Your Love. I mean, it's all about that neck pickup. So now we'll talk briefly about the single coils and the tone knob with those. Okay, so when I first discovered this, it was really just like a joyous moment for me because I'd never realized you could do this. I'd always thought of single coil and humbuckers as different, and they are, but it's having very different tones, and you can't get anywhere near each other with them. And that's sort of true with humbuckers. It's hard to get humbuckers to sound like single coils, but you can get single coils to sound like humbuckers, or at least in the vicinity, by using your tone knob. So here we have the tone all the way up on the bridge pickup, volume all the way up. Again, there's that nice, you know, kind of bright, almost like a P90 sound. Now if I just roll the tone knob down about 6.5 or 7, it starts to kind of get darker, so maybe we'll go down a little further. And all of a sudden your single coil starts to kind of sound like a humbucker. So basically it gets like almost like a PAF type humbucker sound. It's really clean, but not bright on the top end. It's still very clear. So this is great for rhythm sounds when you want to play big chords, you know, like have some sort of harmonic complexity to them. I really like to use this kind of setting for riffs, like stringy sounding riffs. Because it makes the guitar sound more like a guitar and less like a square wave. Because the more distortion you get, the more square wave it sounds, and everybody wants the over-the-top rectified sound, and if you use less than that, you just sound bigger in the mix, I think. It's all opinion, but... so, again, now if I roll the volume back on the single coil a little bit, and here's the tone all the way up. The volume up about 5. We've got to be really clean. Then roll that tone back. And I've got this really cool kind of dialed back rhythm sound. And it doesn't sound like a Strat, and it doesn't sound like a Les Paul, which is what this is kind of close to. It just sounds like a guitar. It has some of those nice frequencies from both aspects. So I really like to use this a lot, particularly on the bridge pickup. So now we'll go over to the neck pickup, and choose the volume all the way up, tone all the way up. So this, I've got a lot of bass on the amp, and so, you know, in the low strings it gets a little woofy. So if I just roll the volume back, and it still sounds single coil. Here we go again with the tone, roll it back to about 4.5 or so. This really kind of mellow, almost like a B.B. King thing, you know? And that's kind of my philosophy on why you should have at least one volume and one tone on your guitar. You know, in this case, I've got 2 volumes and 2 tones, and this switch, so I can do these neat little things where, like, I have the bridge pickup all the way up, humbucking with the tone back a little bit. Really good fat rock sound. But then, let's say for the verse in the song, it's much more mellow. So I've got the tone all the way up and the volume about 4.5 or so in single coil mode, and then I switch the neck. And so what I can effectively do is channel switch with my guitar. You know? Now the only downside to this would be if you're really into just cutting it off quick, and you're one of those guys that uses a bunch of gain and does fast picking and stuff, and you just want to be able to kill it really quick, it's not great for that unless you had like a kill switch or something. I kind of prefer this, but I have guitars with 1 volume and 1 tone, and I love them too. The other thing that you can take advantage of if you have this kind of setup is blending the two pickups together. So if I were to put it in single coil mode with the tone and volume all the way up and both pickups in the middle, it sounds like this. To me, it sounds like kind of an overdriven Gretsch sound. Something like maybe Billy Gibbons might use. But if I roll the neck pickup volume back a little bit and leave everything else the same, it still sounds kind of slinky, but it's not as much. It's a bit more bright. You could do the same thing the other way. You could roll the bridge volume back. Retain some of that top end, but still be, you know, kind of in the neighborhood of a neck pickup. So, to me, as a guitar player, and particularly as a lead guitar player, if you're not using your knobs, then you're not really taking advantage of all the stuff your guitar can do. And some guys don't need to. Some guys like Eddie Van Halen can just play with the volume knob and one pickup and they just sound awesome, so more power to you. But I think, you know, as guitar players, we have these as tools, and, you know, you just take advantage of everything you can. So, so basically, in response to the question that I got on YouTube about, you know, how to use your tone controls and how to use your volume controls and stuff, it just learn your guitar, learn the way it reacts to your amp, and then just really try to take advantage of doing as much as you can from the guitar with your hands and your switches and stuff before you try to even touch anything on your pedal board or your amp or anything. Because then when you do change something like put on an overdrive or put on a delay or something, like, it's going to be a bigger sounding drastic effect, which is what you want. When you want to do that, you want it to be really drastic. So, again, in my opinion. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I'll try to do my best to answer them. And I'll catch you later.